Hi, everyone. This is Michelle. Welcome back to my channel for Expat Life Mexico. I'm so happy again to have Anna Siller back on with me, and also someone else that she works with named Tia. And today we're going to talk about a lot of the changes that are happening with immigration, the laws, the money that we need to qualify to be residents in Mexico. So many changes that are coming, things that have happened in 2022, things that will be different in 2023. So I'm so grateful to Anna for reaching out to me, and also for Tia to be here to kind of just share their knowledge and all the information and updates that I really think is so important for people who seriously want to legally live in Mexico, move to Mexico, and just kind of conducting their business in terms of that move, live abroad the right way, from straight up from the first time around. If you know for sure this is where you want to be, there's nothing against coming as, you know, a visitor to check it out and things like that. But if you really are sure this is where I want to be, this is what I want to do, then they're going to give you a lot of information that I think is very important. We had a pretty intense conversation already about it prior to recording. So I'm going to let them kind of get into the topics and introduce themselves. So Anna is in Lake Chapala, but covers Guadalajara, pretty much this whole area. And Tia is covering Costa Alegre and the small state of Colima, right? And that's all about 4 hours or so south from Costa Alegre is 4 hours south of Puerto Vallarta. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So they're going to kind of get a little bit more in depth on the location, and then we'll talk more about the details of what they want to share with us. So go ahead, Anna, you can introduce yourself.
Thank you so much, Michelle. Thank you for letting me invite myself over on
Absolutely.
your channel. I have had met incredible people thanks to your channel. And I wanted to give everybody a heads up on what are going to be some of the changes that they can expect in the financial requirements in order to qualify to be a resident of Mexico. And I don't know, Tia Richardson, do you want to tell us more about your area that you cover as well as a facilitator?
So my area is called the Costa Alegre, or the Happy Coast. It's about an hour south of Puerto Vallarta in the state of Jalisco, all the way down the central Pacific coast of Mexico into the small state of Colima. And Manzanillo, Colima is Mexico's largest port. It's a very tiny state. It's a very, because of the port, there's people from all over the world, international and everything. And so it's about 3.5, 4 hours of territory is the Costa Alegre. And I met Ana because Ana is where we have to go to handle everything, which is in Guadalajara, the same state of Jalisco. So I jumped the state lines.
Awesome. So basically tell us a little bit about what you do, Anna, and also Tia, like what services and kind of what your focus is.
Well, I thought it was Anna. Go ahead, Anna. I don't want to, mine's so small.
Let me break it kind of down just in general to what the process looks like, and then how we kind of both help in those stages of the process. So getting residency in Mexico is actually broken down into two different processes. One is going to be the one that you complete in the US, where you're apply for the visa at a Mexican consulate in the US. And this is based on financial solvency. So you're required to actually bring in your financial documents and convince the agent that you either have or make enough money to self-sustain in Mexico and not work. The job of the consulate in the United States is to screen for people who are not going to need to work in Mexico. But we know that technically once you have the resident visa, whether you're a temporal or you're a permanente, you are allowed to work in Mexico. But for the purposes of this stage of the process, that's what the agents are looking for. So they do prefer, obviously, retired people and that kind of perpetual income. Or if you do have a business or you work remotely, you have to take enough documentation to show that your income is going to be steady and that, again, you're not going to need to work in Mexico, or you're going to be able to afford having some kind of medical emergency or whatever may happen. You're not going to become a burden on the system per se.
Mhm.
So let's say that for the purpose of this interview, you can either become a temporal resident or a permanent resident. And as it stands today in October 2022, you would need to have an income of at least $2,730. These are approximate amounts for the last 6 months, or you would need to have savings of $45,500 for the last 12 months. That's to qualify for the temporal. This is a visa that needs to be renewed. If you want to qualify for the permanente, which is a visa that doesn't need to be renewed, then you would need to have a pension income of approximately $4,500 a month, or you would need to have a minimum balance in your savings or investment accounts of $181,000 for the last 12 consecutive months. So those are the requirements as they stand today. From 2021 compared to 2022, the requirements went up 22%. It is based on Mexico's minimum wage. Right now, we don't know how much the minimum wage is going to go up. The president has said that it is tricky because of the inflation, but if we were to calculate that the requirements are going to go up 22%, then you would need at least an income of $3,330 for the last 6 consecutive months, or savings of $55,500 for the last 12 consecutive months to qualify for the temporal. And to qualify for the permanente, you would need an income of $5,500 in pension income, or have $221,000 in the bank for the last 12 consecutive months.
Okay, so that's a projection for 2023, the second set of numbers. Okay, I have questions about that because you said it's based on Mexico's minimum wage, but it's actually not, right? It's minimum wage times what? Isn't it minimum wage
Like
times
20,
3?
30, 40. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But what makes the amounts increase is that it is the minimum wage multiplied by a certain number.
Right.
So if the minimum wage is going to go up, then that amount is going to go up. And we know
Right.
that there's other criteria, that is the UMA,
Mhm.
which is also going to go up. And that is a criteria that is usually only applied within Mexico,
Mhm.
or at right now, McAllen would be the only other consulate that has those lower requirements.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify that because as a non-Mexican, people are going to
Right.
say, why do I need
That's
to
not
make that
minimum
much
wage in
money?
Mexico.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's why I wanted to
Right.
say the minimum
No,
wage
it's
increases, but it's
multiplied,
always the minimum wage times we need to be sure we can take care of ourselves so we're not a burden on their system. So it's usually, I think it's times 3, I want to say.
Mhm.
So whatever that minimum wage number is, and when it does increase by 22%, well, that's what it did last year to
That's
this
the
year.
increase that they had this year, correct?
Right. Okay. Just wanted to be
We're
sure.
talking about 300 times the UMA for the temporal, and 500 or minimum wage, and 500 times for the permanente.
Okay. All right.
For
So
the income
mhm.
and for the savings, it's 5,000 and 20,000 times the minimum wage.
Okay. So I'm going to pause for a second and let Tia jump in and just introduce yourself and talk about, what you do in your area.
Okay, I'm fairly new to the business, under 2 years, and so I'm doing the same things that Anna is, doing the consulting and getting into helping people outside of Mexico. And then once they get there here, offer them digital services wherever they're at in Mexico, and doing a perpetual digital service so that if they need anything in the future, I'm able to offer that in my services package. And if I don't, that I can refer them out to someone like Anna that has a larger service package at the time and can facilitate a lot more things. So I'm at this point hands-on a lot with my clients. I meet 4 days a week, all day at 2 different state immigration offices. And that's my goal moving forward. And so I'm hoping to open up my packages to be more expansive on all of the things that you'll need to relocate to Mexico if you're going to be here 4 months, 6 months, or if you're going to be here full time.
Okay. All right. So I have a question about the numbers. We just want to jump back. What about, because that's for one person. What if you have a child? What does that look like?
Well, there's specific amounts depending on in all of these scenarios, whether you're going to go for the temporal or the permanente, through the income or through the savings, how much extra money you have to have for the dependent. So that would be like a specific question. And it also depends, like if the spouse, for example, has their name on the bank account or not. So I did want to tell you in regards to my services that I do offer this like 3-stage service, where the first stage would be going through all of these requirements with you and analyzing your financials to see if you qualify, and doing everything we can so that you qualify on your own and you don't have to be a dependent. And that will make the process simpler for you down the line. And then I also offer the service of getting you the consulate appointment and then getting you ready for the appointment just a few days before, to make sure that you have your checklist ready to go, where you're going to stay, how you should dress, and whatever other questions people may have. So we really guide you through that whole process until the moment that you have your visa and your passport. Then we also have another consultation about how to enter Mexico, which we'll talk about huge changes, very important changes for people that are entering Mexico with their resident visa and their passport, and they need to convert that to a card in Mexico. There's some significant changes that could, if you're going to need a little extra help in. So once we have that part is concluded, then we go to the part of the services here in Mexico, which Kia does offer to prepare your paperwork so that you can go to the immigration office where you're located. I mostly just let my clients let me do everything for them. Like, don't touch it.
Yeah. Okay. So before we get into more of those pieces and moving parts, because it keeps changing. So one question. Okay. So with the dependent thing, I guess that varies. It's not based on like a percentage of what you like, 2,730 plus $500 because you have a child, or plus, like, is there a percentage or a number, or is it just varying depending on where you are in Mexico? Do you know?
No, there's specific amounts, but like I said, we have this scheme where it's like, well, are you gonna apply as a permanente or are you gonna apply as a temporal?
Well, that number was for like a temporary, because most people are going to come as temporary. Most people, not everyone, but most people, especially if you have a child, possibly are going to come this way. I'm only asking you because that's my scenario. And when I was in Miami, I think it was like an additional $500 a month. And it was fine, but I'm just saying, like, if a family were inquiring.
It depends if you're qualifying through your income or through your savings or investment, how much money you're going to need for the dependent.
Got it. Okay. So that's the defining question.
Specifically, we can go to the list of, where you're at and then decide. And then there's some other nuances, you know, like you can like about bringing more than one child and what that whole situation is.
Okay.
I
So
can also,
then my other question in terms of both of you is you're servicing and okay, you're in Guadalajara and Tia is in Colima, but are you servicing everywhere in Mexico? Or are you just servicing your area? Are you able to offer your digital services to everyone, everywhere? Is that,
Yep.
yeah, okay.
Tia does
Yes.
offer that, and I do not. I just offer to take on the entire process for my client here locally.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
yeah,
go ahead.
I do offer digital services, but it's less than 10% of what I do. So I can process you in like I just did some folks in La Paz. I don't process everywhere in Mexico. There's certain places that I don't really get into. So if I have a client that's like, you know, I've changed my mind and I don't want to come to that area, I do try to focus on my area so that I can get to know the customers because I enjoy that.
Okay,
And I really want to have my face there. So my digital services are more after the fact, after I've connected with a client and we've done one or more projects, that I can have a perpetual relationship with them where I can say, hey, your passport's about ready to expire, you know, on 8 months. I don't suggest, you know, no governments want you to be traveling. And that also comes into play down here. Certain offices at certain times, if you come in and your passport's a month before it's due, some of these processes in certain areas, especially our Jalisco areas, can take a long time. So you have to have a valid identification document that's different for each one of the programs Anna and I do. And so it's providing that perpetual assistance more than the one and done. I'm not necessarily into the one and done. I want to build up more clients through that, and so that I can touch more phases of what they do here in Mexico.
okay. But what I guess I just want to clarify, for example, I don't live where you live. If I needed your
Right.
services, do you help me in San Miguel and
Yes.
Guanajuato? Okay.
Yes.
But you don't, Anna, right? You're focused on Guadalajara pretty much because you
And Lake
want
Chapala.
you and Lake Chapala, right? And Ajijic. Okay, I just want to be clear about that because when you said digital services, it's sort of like, okay, that opens it up a little bit more. And people will ask those questions. And, you know, I just want to be sure that they understand that, yes, there are some digital services that Tia will be able to kind of follow you through on, like you said, with the passport expiring. I experienced that, by the way. Yeah, kind of having a personal like, hoo-hoo, you know, this happened not to me, but to my son. I thought for some reason it was expiring in 2023. But it was actually this year. And I have to say hats off to the US consulate because it was not that complicated to go through and kind of do a rush thing. I thought I was going to have to go. This is the San Miguel location. I thought I was going to have to go to the US, and I was just like panicked because I didn't discover it until a month or so before it expired. And I just was like, oh my God, we're supposed to travel, whatever. My point is it's nice to have that. And also, if I had someone that I could call, you know, and get help with how do I do this? I had, you know, a few people that had recently done it and they told me what they did, but it was just nice to know that, you know, I got the help because I really started to think I had to go to Mexico City and I actually didn't in the end.
No.
And it wasn't that painful, but it's just a not knowing. So it's good to know that you can also help with those things, because I think the biggest challenge that we all kind of experience as foreigners living in Mexico is the language. If we're not fluent in, like I can speak it enough, but to do things like this, I feel like the information isn't always clear. You kind of are a little bit nervous about who you ask questions of. I don't like asking people questions on Facebook because it's just never accurate. It's just sort of, it's an experience that people share, but it's not necessarily accurate. So that's a great service. At the end, like make sure you like tell people how to be in contact with you. both and what you're offering so that that's clear. Okay, so let's
I
jump
do want to
into.
clarify that when it comes to the entire part of the process of getting the visa in the United States, there's no problem with where you are. That is a service that is 100% done remotely.
Okay,
So at least we
perfect,
could start off there, and
perfect.
then mhm.
Okay, I had one question for you because you mentioned McAllen, Texas as being one of the places where right now the financial requirement is less. First, do you know what it is and why? And are people allowed to go there? Because I know some people who have from other states. Like, what's the logic? What do you think the logic is? It doesn't make any sense to me, but okay. Just like, is it because that area has people who make less money? Like what's the logic? I don't get it. I don't know. I've never been
I don't
there.
personally know why they apply the UMA versus the minimum wage there. I don't know
Okay.
why.
Okay.
But I actually
Mm.
at first like wouldn't send people there because I'm like, no, you like that, like, no, you can't go there, you can't do that. And then a
Okay.
bunch of people were like, no, I went there and it was fine. And I have even heard about them like emailing people saying that they're not going to, like, even if you have an appointment, they're not going to, they're canceling the appointment, and people show
Okay.
up and they're like, all right, come in, and they have the appointment anyway.
Oh,
So
okay.
like that's not a great system to work with if you're trying to like help people out. So me personally,
Yeah.
I don't send people to McAllen. I'm like,
Okay.
these
I
are the
just
requirements.
wondered, I've
I
never
need
been
you
there.
to.
Yeah, I haven't been there. I haven't, but I know a few people who did go because they couldn't get appointments where they were because they just weren't available. And people who went, flew and got there, did it within a few hours and they were all set. So I was just kind of curious because you happened to mention that the requirement
Yeah,
was a little less. So I just try to
in
make
my
some
opinion,
sense out of it.
there's like other consulates that are easy to work with that are not necessarily McAllen, and
Okay.
like that the main attraction is that they have this they use a different unit to calculate the requirement.
Okay. All right. Well, let's talk about, let's see. Well, we talked a little bit about the numbers, but let's talk about entering Mexico. That's changed in terms of you're not getting this little paper that you stick into your passport anymore, right? Is that it? Okay. So this is for tourists and also for people who are arriving as a new resident to Mexico after you're approved in the US. This applies to both. So just so people don't freak out, because we know the paper has been in existence for a really long time. So explain that to us.
Yeah, do you want to tell us about the pilot program? Because I have little knowledge of most of the states.
Well, I think you should, since I border hop between the two states, my Manzanillo Colima is still doing the paper FMM document. I call it the traditional FMM document. And yet I'm part of Jalisco as well, which is your state. And Guadalajara and Puerto Vallarta in the state of Jalisco are part of the pilot program. So I'm still teetering between two different platforms, and I make sure that when I consult my clients on their entry into Mexico, that I tell them one of many ways that they may enter, but what their responsibility is, for example, for canje, to get their visas to their card. And I need them to know what their responsibilities are and what they'll come up against. So I think Anna would probably be better because she has more clients that fly into the pilot programs.
Okay.
Right. So it's a pilot program in the sense that only some entries have it, but it's not a pilot program, I think, in the sense of it's going away. Obviously, it's going to be phased in electronic, updates across the board. So like you said, Michelle, you're and this is very recent. So people a month ago who entered Mexico and Guadalajara might have still received a paper. So you're like, oh my God, I have a paper. What do I do? That's fine. This is a new program. I had mentioned to you that it doesn't seem like there's any legal need to download the FMM. What does that mean? At immigration, they'll show you a QR code, which is basically a website. You go to this website, you create an account, you enter all your information, you upload a picture of your passport, and it creates this FMM looking paper that's 2 pages. And it actually has like how many days you had on the visa. So many people had seen this announcement from the State Department circulating about people needing to print this FMM in order to prove that they are legally in the country, because you know how the State Department is always sending notices like, if you don't have your passport, they're gonna throw you in jail and blah, blah. They're saying now if you don't have your FMM, and literally that like a lot of Mexican government don't know about this, which we've found out is true because the paper FMM used to be stamped. So now the passport is going to get stamped. The FMM has to be downloaded, and you're not going to have a stamped FMM anymore. So obviously it's in development. So we'll see how that goes. But you should know that at some airports, they're not issuing paper FMMs. They're scribbling on your passport how many days. If you really want to make sure how many days you got, you're going to have to go online, create this account. Of course, if you retain our services, we'll do all that for you. And this is especially important for people who are entering Mexico as residents for the first time. We really need that paper to be filled out correctly and generate correctly in order to process this second part of your residency.
So if there's no paper, what do you need filled out properly?
The agent at the immigration port has to understand exactly what you're trying to do.
Gotcha.
That you are entering Mexico as a first timer, that you have this visa that you got at the consulate, that your lawyer said you need to write CANJE on the passport and in your little computer and give me 30 days. And in your little computer, give me 30 days too, because we are having people who have it filled out correctly, but it's not correct in the system, so they can't go forward.
Okay, that's not good. That's not good. Okay, so you're able to kind of start with them in the US when they do the consulate, make sure that they're entering. That's a part of the digital service that you provide. Okay, so that means here's what it looks like when you get to the airport. If you don't get the paper, because I know when I entered years ago, you know, it was like, don't say you're a tourist, don't do this and whatever. That was like a whole different look. Right now, it's sort of in transition to being no paper, stamp in the passport, scribble in the passport, and making sure that they enter that stuff, because maybe all the agents don't know what they're supposed to do. Yeah, so, you know, I just want to
this could affect people who already have the residency. I don't know if you know, but I've heard both things, that you still have to go to immigration before your flight and check out. And I've also heard that they check you out at the counter. So that's, to me, for my clients, I'm like, you go 2 hours before the immigration, and if they tell you don't need to be there, then that's great.
I'm saying that
we don't know.
I'm saying the same thing, but I'm overly cautious. And I tell all of my clients, I send them, once they get their card and I have their information, I send them one email, how to exit and enter Mexico. And I also talk to them over the phone and say, I'm going to send you this email and we are in transition. But as somebody that doesn't want to lose their residency, I always suggest you still check out, because originally, if you read the it's a verbal contract with the Mexican government when you apply for residency, that in the past, that they get to track you. That means you check in before you leave and you check in when you come into the country. Now, for people that want to go and naturalize, it's very important that they check in and out, because the number of days matter when that time comes. I don't want to talk about that, but I'm telling all my clients, this is what can happen. I want you to go. I want you to check out at the last airport before you leave Mexico. If they say, oh, you don't need anything, ask them if you need your passport stamped, because that was the old process. And I don't know how they're going to be tracking anybody unless the new cards have a barcode and they scan them, and I don't see that happening.
Well, they
So,
do, but I mean, I have people who still have laminated cards. So how long is it going to take for everybody to get a card with a
and
QR?
I don't like that. And so I tell all my clients, please do this. If you decide that it's not important, then that's great. But I suggest that you still do that and at least get a stamp in your passport with an RT or a PR, on that.
From our perspective, we're looking at how does the agent mark you when you enter and you go out. That's the most important thing.
Okay.
So like I've had a lot of people lose the residency because they're traveling with a copy of the card. No, you have to have the actual card with you. We had a debacle right now with all this changes. The processes are taking a very long time. And people, I need to leave, can you courier me the card, la 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 la, like no, you stay here and you go pick up your card with your passport. Like there's no in around it about it. So
well, I think okay, but I think we're talking about a few things in one conversation. So to be clear is, when you're entering Mexico for the first time, or even, we won't focus on the tourists. We'll talk about you coming in as, I was approved to live in Mexico. There are steps that are changed from before with you had a paper. Some places are still given the paper, some are not given the paper. Your services are going to clearly dictate what you need to make sure the agent marks in the system, so that when you go to immigration and you go to finish filling out all their paperwork, that it's accurate and that it's not going to basically cause a cancellation of everything they just did, right? Okay. So the other part of that is, as a
for
tourist,
people who already have a car. Oh, sorry.
Right. Okay. Well, we can talk about, let's talk about the tourist. If you're a tourist, you also may not get a paper, right? Is that maybe, depending again on where you come in, right? You may just get a stamp with, if you can read it, how many days, a scribble. And you go to the same website, we're going to get that website covered, to look and see how many days was I approved for. Even if they say it, okay, you got 180, doesn't mean you got 180. You need to look in the system. Is that correct? Okay. And then the other part is you're already a resident, right?
Sorry, going back to the tourist, that you may need to print this FMM to prove that you have a permit as a tourist in Mexico.
Okay. All right. So that's all very important. And I think, okay, that's a lot, but okay. So if you are already a resident, temporary, I'm assuming permanent as well, because when I left Mexico in August, I had to go to immigration post in the airport, even with my card. Everyone, actually, I'm even sure Mexicans had to do it. I had to fill out this whole paper that said I was leaving that day on this whatever. And when I came back, I had to give them this paper that I was back in the country, right? So you're saying if for some reason you're not checked out and checked back in, that would cause a problem with your residency? Is that what you're saying?
No, I said, no. I said naturalization, and there are a lot of people. So if you're coming back and forth, I suggest to my clients to get a stamp. They can at least pull a stamp out and have a salida and an entrada into the country if you're concerned at all about your residency.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because of the nuances of we don't know what's going on at that airport.
Exactly.
I
And-
have heard in some places they're going to be doing that at the counter, but we don't know that part right now. So
Okay.
still allow time to always go to immigration.
Okay.
Yeah.
And immigration in the airport.
That's
Is that
correct.
what you mean?
The
Okay.
last airport that you're leaving. So for example, where I'm located in Manzanillo, Colima,
Mhm,
we have 2 flights a day,
mhm.
every day, that go directly to Mexico City. It's a short little hop, an hour, 20-minute flight.
Mhm.
And so a lot of people leave Manzanillo, Colima and head to Mexico City.
Mhm.
They're not going to check out in Manzanillo, Colima because the last airport or port of exit is going to be Mexico City.
Right.
So it's the last place that you're out of what we formerly did. And I'm a person I like to have a little bit of caution. So when I go to leave, I'm going to make sure that I have a stamp in my passport or something
Mhm.
just to come and go, because none of us really know how this is going to all go down.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. Because I don't remember having to fill out a form before to leave and having a paper when I come back. Does that make sense? It was always the opposite. And this
You
time I
fill
had
it out
to,
on the plane and they used to take it from you before you approach the immigration.
And
but that
and
was
when
when
I
I
left-
came, that was when I came back into
Mm-hmm.
Mexico, not when I was leaving Mexico and then giving the paper when I come back. So that
Mhm,
part
right.
is what happened. And I was just like, okay, I did it, but
Mhm.
never had that before.
and I've never left without the paper. So that's, we each have different experiences. I've always had a paper and always checked out on salida. So
Okay. I'm just trying to think, maybe that could have been my first time since I got my residency that I went outside the country as well, because I've been flying in Mexico and I had not traveled outside of the country since 2020. So maybe, but in 2020, I don't remember doing that when I flew to Florida.
Yeah, there's
But-
no document that you turned in to exit. You just gave them notice that you're leaving at immigration.
I just got
And-
yeah, right.
Mhm.
And actually, Anna, in our area, when I used to travel quite a bit more, even in Guadalajara airport, I would always report to immigration and I would fill out a salida every time. And they did give me the bottom section of the salida and it
Okay.
had all my information on it. So Vallarta, Guadalajara, and Manzanillo, I always had that form in my passport when I left the country.
Okay, no, that's good to know. So there's a form that you fill out at an immigration stand after security in Mexico City. I don't know about the other airports. That
Right.
is kind of like a customs form, even with your residency. And even if you have a US or any other passport, you fill that out and you take that with you as an exit. And when you come back in, they take it. Just putting it out there because that's something I experienced in August, but had not experienced before. So
Right.
just in case people
Right.
don't know, just so they know, because it's easy to miss because you go through security, you think you're done. That actually should be before you go through. I don't know. It just seems like it's in the wrong place logically for me. I'm like, maybe when you're checking in with your, at the airlines, but it's a complete separate office. So yeah.
Well, Anna can correct me, but I believe Mexico City is the only place that you actually go through security before immigration, where the kiosk is.
Okay.
Every other airport I've flown into and stuff, it's always before security.
That
So
makes
she
sense.
She can
Right.
correct me on that.
Yeah, because you could miss it. And I think because my son took a solo flight from Mexico City to Miami, and when he got to the gate, they were like, oh, he doesn't have something or another. And I was just like, what are you talking about? And I was just,
That's
you
why we're
know,
saying like get there early, show everybody
I
your
was
cards.
there
Like,
early. I was there 4 hours early, 4 hours. And furthermore, I paid for, the person to help. I had to go to immigration here in San Miguel to get forms signed that it was okay for him to fly by himself to Miami. We had to show a passport. There was just a bunch of stuff. I did every single thing, but I couldn't go beyond security to do this last piece of paper that I didn't know about. And the attendant that, took him through was supposed to do this and didn't. And I couldn't go through security. So in Mexico City, when a minor is flying alone, this is one of the airports, they don't allow the parents to go to the gate. In the US, you can go to the gate with your child. So I would have known that. So I was like, well, you guys took over at security and whatever. So this person calls me. And of course, my first, his first solo flight. And I'm telling you, my blood pressure went from the ground to here. And I was flipping out. I was just like, what? And then I went to the American airline counter and I was just like, what's missing? You guys didn't say anything. Anyway, it got sorted. But that, I think, was what it was, this paper that I couldn't have access to. So just, information sharing, all the stuff that happens here in the country we love. So in saying all of that, I think we should jump into, well, we said we were going to talk about that. The FMM process, which changed downloading bank account stuff. I feel like we're missing something. What else did you want to share with us?
well, the like post, let's say that you came to Mexico and you hired a great facilitator such as Tia or me to get your visa. Some other things that are new legally in Mexico is this enforcement of having to have a tax ID number, which is
Yes.
called an RFC. Obviously, this is all geared towards Mexico getting that tax money in, eliminating that informal income that wasn't, bringing in money to the government, combating money laundering, et cetera, et cetera. So we do see that 4C that is going to be enforced more and more. And many people will say, well, I don't have an income in Mexico. I don't own property. I'm not even thinking about buying a car. Those aren't the only reasons why you would need a tax ID. You would need a tax ID to purchase health insurance. You might need even a tax ID to get private medical services. And we expect the list to grow. The enforcement of this requirement is going to happen in January 2023. So this was something that was set to be enforced, but obviously, since it applies to every Mexican over 18, there was just not enough appointments. This is something that has to be done in person at a federal tax office. So that's another one of the services that both Tia and I offer. Okay, we got you the visa at the consulate. We got you the card at Mexican immigration. Now let's get you your tax ID number. Look at your needs. There are people who are generating income. What regimen do you need to be under? What services do you need from an accountant? And that we think that all of these things should happen before people buy property, because buying property in Mexico is going to put a dent in your bank account, and then you're not going to qualify for the visa, because buying property before becoming a resident and not having your tax ID, you may not have all the paperwork that you need further down the line. So we think that people should first focus on the residency, then focus on the tax ID, and then buy property.
Okay.
Yeah, and I confer with that. And Anna, I ran up to something today and I didn't think that list would be expanding, and that list expanded this morning at immigration today. and Anna let me know about certain things. If you don't have an RFC number, you won't get a refund if you pay certain government services.
If you make a
So-
mistake, if you make a mistake paying at immigration, the only way to get reimbursed is if you have an RFC.
So I firmly believe she's correct and I'm starting to see it. I used to only concentrate on people that were in the process of a real estate transaction so they could save on their capital gains. But have since got involved with people that said, oh, well, I don't need an RFC because it's just going to go to my kids. And I said, have you hooked that up with your accountant? Because once the property leaves this to goes to the other, somebody has to pay the capital gains on that. And so that's incurred by the next person. And so she is right. This is expanding daily on why you'll need an RFC.
Okay, so this is something you help people get. Do they have to go in person or you help them with the application process?
Well, some of my clients that I took today were telling me about how in the US, like you get a tax ID when you're 7 or something, like it's an automatic thing, or
Tax ID?
I don't know.
No, you don't. You get a
Like,
social security
Yeah.
number.
Well, okay, let's just focus on the fact that it's like an automated thing in the US. Like you just have something automatically. Here you have to actually go register and ask for it. Most foreigners are going to be asked, why do you want a tax ID? Because some officials in the tax office themselves might not understand why or how foreigners should register for the tax ID. So it's really important to have like a facilitator with you to help you prepare paperwork, which is not so expensive. Getting the appointment is complicated because there's no availability because everybody's trying to do it at the same time. And definitely recommend taking a translator with you to help you with the process because the agents themselves might not,
Exactly.
understand what you're asking for.
It's just like immigration. You can have the nicest person in the world wanting to help you, but if it's outside of their wheelhouse, they're not necessarily gonna lead you the right direction. And she's absolutely right. I think the services she provides on that is very smart to be in person.
Okay, so and that makes sense because I'm just saying, like, with the tax ID stuff, yeah, like so you get a CURP, right? Which we would consider similar to our social security number, right? Tax ID, in my mind, or the RFC, it reminds me of something like if you have a business in the US and you get the tax ID, right? The FEIN number, so you can get the benefits, blah, blah, blah. But the RFC, it sounds to me like it's kind of to help regulate things a little bit more, like whose hair, who's getting what, who's getting services. Like you said, they're going to see who is getting, possibly regulating who receive medical services, whether it's in the private sector or public sector, things like that. So getting it, because I looked into this as well, and you have to physically be the person. Like I have to physically be the person who goes there. Are you allowed to come with me and translate? Is that accurate? Or do you just fill the paper out, get me the appointment, and I go and kind of figure it out myself?
Well, the offices where I work, I'm allowed in, but it is
Okay.
up to the discretion. Like they might say, no, we have agents who speak English because a lot of them are like college students that are completing their, professional internships there. So they do speak English. So they might not allow you to bring in a facilitator because they have somebody who speaks English.
Okay.
But you should still, like even in the case of my clients who don't want to go in with a facilitator, I'll still provide them a very long, detailed explanation of what they're going to ask you, what you need to answer, what not to say, what's going to happen. They're going to ask you to describe your house. How many stories is it? And then you're going to go sit in an area and you're going to wait until they call out your name and they're going to hand back your paperwork to you. So even if you're going to go in yourself, you should retain somebody who's going to explain to you what to expect and how to do it. And this is a process that the appointments are extremely scarce. So you don't want to be late, like by even 1 minute. So it's a huge deal.
Okay.
In
So,
fact, there's a 15-minute early check-in. If you don't check in 15 minutes in my area, if you don't check in 15 minutes early, you don't get your appointment.
okay. Well, that's good to know. And so far from what I understand, and just even going to try to obtain it, it sounds like it has applied to people who are buying a home, like you said, or would like to buy a home, would like to buy a car. Is that also accurate? And yeah, what else? Because they're
definitely
so
selling
selling a house, because they're so,
Yeah.
like, because the appointments are hard to get now. Some people have said, like some consultants here in SMA, like, okay, yes, go for it, but give it some time for them to catch up, basically, because they're so backed up and they're so behind.
Well, I don't think that they're going to catch up because the enforcement is going to happen in January. So it's only going to get busier.
Okay.
Correct.
But there's a lot of ways to get appointments quicker, especially, for example, if you are over 60. There are some offices that offer same day appointments for over 60-year-olds, or your facilitator might, like in my case, have a system in place to be able to get appointments quickly. So
okay. So how would
do
that apply to, like, let's say, I have a lot of people that are coming here and, they're just getting here, they're just getting their residency, they're renting, a small apartment, or just an apartment they're renting. They have no car, like,
they should get an RFC.
okay, but why? Just because people are going to ask that question, or they'll be asking me, and I'll be like, I'm not sure. Just kind of
Because
explain it, because
more and more providers are going to be required by the government to prove that they paid the income tax on what this person spent at my practice, at my store.
Gotcha.
It could be, I've heard even people can't buy tires because the tire people wanted to know the RFC so they can issue the correct fiscal invoice and prove to the government that I'm not saying that I sold 50 million tires, but I only sold one and the rest was fentanyl money,
Got it.
So
Right.
it's
Okay.
in order to consume like anything, and
Right.
that's going to be more and more. So, and
Okay.
for me, the worrying part is the medical. I think that would be like the worst case scenario if somebody was incapacitated medically and they were not being able to issue a correct bill or rectify a situation or make a bank transfer or do XY amount of things because they don't have a tax ID and they're not allowed to move money in Mexico that way anymore.
Okay. Okay. No, this is fantastic. I think people need to know this, because I know there was a lot of, like, talk about it when it was like suddenly this is a requirement. And since then, it seems like people have kind of fizzled off on discussing it, because they were like, well, it's hard to get an appointment, let them get caught up if you don't really have property and blah, blah, blah. So again, being here, not only is there the language barrier for a lot of foreigners, but there's also a lot of miscommunication. There's a lot of things that just keep, a lot of moving parts that just keep changing. And the information is never accurate or clear, or it's hard to get it. I mean, really simple stuff, it's really hard to get a clear, understanding, I think, as a foreigner, like, where do I go to get this untangled and answer these questions exact, and why do I need this? And I think sometimes people, we as foreigners, and I say we too, we tend to have like, okay, we got our temporary, we're doing what we think is the right thing. And if we hear something and it sounds unclear or whatever, I think it becomes dismissed. People become very dismissive about it, even with the,
Yeah.
you know, residency and the card and this, people are like, well, I heard this and I heard that. And then you get frustrated. You're just like, you know, okay, I'm going to dismiss it, or I'm going to take the piece of information that least you know, sounds least painful to me.
More
You know what I'm
convenient.
saying?
Yeah.
More convenient to me, right? I'm gonna hang on to this because I heard it on
Yeah.
Facebook. So I think it's important for people to understand, like, yes, this applies to you as well. Even if you don't own a house, you're not selling a house, you don't have a car, you're just renting.
Making money. Mhm.
Exactly, anything.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And that it used to be very easy to get a tax ID online.
Mhm.
So like me, my process is first I check if the person already has one. A lot of times people don't know that they already have an RFC
Mhm.
and they're freaking out because they gotta get an appointment and they don't need to be doing all that. So the
Okay.
first thing I offer is to check whether or not you have an RFC. If you do, get you the paperwork that you're gonna need to give wherever they ask you for your RFC. It's not a card, it's a paper, it's a
Mhm.
certificate
Mhm.
that has a date on it. And this certificate is saying Michelle does not need to declare any taxes in Mexico and she's all caught up 100% on her obligations.
Mhm.
So if I give you this paper October 10th, by December, you take it, they ask you at your insurance, bring me your RFC paper. They're going to say, I need a more updated one. So the third thing that I offer is for people, that's an example of the certificate,
Mhm.
for people to gain access to the portal where they
Mhm.
can always download their updated certificates at any point that they need. So
Okay.
it's 3 different phases of the process. Finding out whether or not you have one. If you
Mhm.
don't, I can get you an appointment anywhere in Mexico very quickly.
Mhm.
And once you do have an RFC and all that stuff, get you set up for the portal so that you have access to your information whenever you need it.
Okay. And do you have like
That's all remote.
do you have like what's the cost or price or range, or is it like depending on your situation for someone to get their
I'd say that
RFC?
for right now for getting the certificate is 500 pesos
Mhm.
and access to the portal, but the access to the portal is uh it's kind of a complicated process.
Mhm.
And when it comes to the appointments, it depends on, you know, are you going to want the facilitator to go with you? Are you willing to share the ride?
Mhm.
Um, you know, and some people need more than just registering. So,
Okay.
yeah.
And
That's
that
a really hard question because she has quite a drive to get, and Anna will tell you, there's only certain offices
Mhm.
that can do RFCs for certain residents.
Mhm.
I have to drive almost 2.5 hours one way to get
Mhm.
my clients. So my cost is going to be higher than her cost. And so it really is relative to each person's situation.
Okay. Well, I wanted to ask that because I know what it costs here. And I think it's good to just share that as a range. It doesn't mean it's that drop dead and it's only this. Here I can tell you it's a lot more than that. And I don't think they're driving 2 hours to anywhere because the offices are here. I don't know. I'm only speaking from my own personal experience, and you know, yeah, it was definitely more than that. So I think it's just good for you to have a range, and you can say, this is what, this is where we start at. We start at 500, and it can be more because it all depends on your situation and if I'm coming with you, not coming with you. But reach out, and this is how you can get those details after maybe you have a consultation or a conversation or email or whatever with them. So
Right,
'cause
and I do have a set range. I do have a set range. And mine goes up to 5,500 pesos because of the long commute and
Right.
because only one office can handle that. So I
Okay.
do go up to that. between 3,500, 4,000 pesos to up to 5,500, because it's an entire, it's a 6-hour workday, and that's not including some traveling. So
Okay. And you offer to go with them as well. Is that?
I do.
In
I
that case,
don't do
okay.
as many as Anna does,
Mhm.
because it is very time consuming. And so if
Okay.
I have the opportunity to bundle people,
Mhm. Then you will.
it's like Anna said, the appointment system is very volatile. So the fact that she has access to get the appointments, you really have to be ready to go at a moment's notice, because you can't reschedule. If you cancel, you can't reschedule for 30 days.
Okay. But those
Yeah,
appointments.
anyone who wanted to retain for getting an appointment, they would have to commit to being willing to go at any moment in the next day. Like I can call you at 7 p.m. and tell you that you need to be there at 9 in the morning.
Okay, but that's in Guadalajara, because all of these appointments for RFCs require you to physically be there, correct?
But we're talking about getting the appointment.
Right, getting the appointment, but in Guadalajara, you can't get an appointment in San Miguel. Or can
Yes,
you?
you can.
Yes, I
Okay,
can.
okay, all
Yeah.
right, I guess I didn't
Yeah,
understand that part. Mhm.
Yeah, I just got appointments. I just got 2 appointments in Ensenada and 1 in Tijuana.
Okay, okay, so
Yeah.
you don't, I need to physically be able to get up and go to the appointment wherever it is that you're getting them for the person who lives where they live. That's the part, because when you were talking about driving 6 hours, I'm like, okay, is it the person or
Well, 'cause
us together?
it can be what the person decides. If they are in Baja, well, we can't go with them.
Mhm.
But even if they're here at Lakeside, there's some people who don't want the transportation of the facilitator. They show up late to the appointment and they don't get they don't get it done when they don't go in
Right.
with the facilitator, but that's an option.
Right.
So it's like you could go in by yourself, but the pivotal thing here is getting the appointment, because you have to have a paper that says I have an appointment with my
Mhm.
name and my curb and this exact time on it, and if you don't show up with that paper, you're not going to get in. So that's like what we offer, is that we're going to
Okay.
get you the confirmation of the appointment so you can show up to
Okay,
whatever office you need to.
that's
And
good
give
to
you
know.
very detailed instructions on what to expect during the appointment and everything if you're going to do it by yourself.
Perfect. No, that's good to know, because as I said, there are people who offer those services here as well. And, that's why I was like, well, what's the cost or range? Because, I live in San Miguel and people are watching me for the purpose of being in San Miguel. And it's good for them to know, like, hey, you can help them even though you're not physically here. You still can get them those appointments. You can still walk them through those steps and services. And, this is what the cost starts at, and so, yeah. So that's kind of why I was asking. Yeah, I think there are 2 people here that I've heard that are doing the same thing. Yeah. Cool. So, ¿qué más?
Not much besides that. A whole bunch of stuff that we want to dump on you and update you on, Michelle.
No, this is great. I mean, I learned a lot. I mean, I'm sure it's going to change in a year from now, but hey, this is where we are right now, 2022.
Yeah, we're probably touching base in January when we have all those amounts. Obviously, all of the fees for immigration are also going to go up. So, like right now, people who are getting their visas, I'm like, okay, right now it costs this much to get the permanente or temporal, but I don't know how much it's going to cost in 2023 yet. We'll know the 2nd of January.
So you mentioned, what you mentioned to me about being able to apply for permanente. Do you want to talk about that, or is that something you're still
I
hashing
mean,
out?
I don't want to like further confuse people, because we know that you can be a temporal for 4 years and then automatically go to the permanente. Automatically just meaning that you don't need to qualify financially.
Mhm.
You qualify on the basis of having lived here for 4 years.
Mhm.
But there are some people that might be traveling. They're not going to be here in time for their renewals. They don't want to be dealing with it. and they just want to become permanente now, then
Okay.
you can apply on the basis of financial solvency, taking
Okay.
into account that the requirement is lower in Mexico because they're applying the
In
UMA unit.
Mexico. Okay.
So you might not have qualified for the permanente at the US consulate and you only got the temporal, but you
Mhm.
do have enough money to qualify for the permanente using a different measure of unit, which would be something that you would have to discuss with your lawyer to see whether or not you qualify.
Okay.
There is a way to become a permanente before 4 years. You don't
Okay.
have to, it's just an option. It's for people who don't find the renewals feasible or convenient.
Mhm.
They don't
Mhm.
live here full time and
Okay.
they'd have to travel here. So that's just an extra option.
And is that amount based also on the same numbers, or is it kind of a per person?
No, it's a different unit. So it's the same unit that they use in McAllen.
Okay. That's good to know. Yeah, so I think there's a lot to know, a lot of, information that I think is very, very important for people to just understand. Every year things are costing more, going up. And, like if you do know that you want to be here, it makes sense to apply and or see what kind of things you should do to prepare yourself before you make the plan. I think a lot of times people think they can't apply until they're like ready to leave and move right away, right? But they can kind of do it in advance, like you said, depending on their situation, whether or not they're already here, are they going to be here in 4 years, or what I've heard from some other local immigration consultants is, you should or you can apply also before you leave your job. So I don't know if that's advice you give, but it's basically, showing, hey, I make this money every month and I'm going to move. I think a lot
Yeah.
of the misconceptions, or maybe not even a misconception, it's to me, it's just logical that you would apply when you're coming here because that salary may not be the salary I'm going to continue to get after I get here. But it sounds to me like maybe that's also something. I don't really know. I've heard that from some other people that, met with local immigration consultants, that you should apply because the numbers are going up and you have this income. Yeah.
Yes, definitely the solvency is the main concern.
Mhm.
And that there is no minimum or maximum amount of time that you have to be in or outside of Mexico to keep the residency.
Okay.
So as long as you're here in time for your renewals. So yeah, people can have it and they can just come down, finish the process, get their green card, and then decide later. But they'll never have to worry about proving financials again in most cases.
Okay, that's good to know. So tell us, each of you, how people can be in touch with you if they're interested in any of these services, and also if you have like a place online where just kind of list what you offer, what your offer is. Because I know Ann and I, we had conversations twice, and you at that time we were doing a lot of like translations and relocation things, but it sounds like you've grown, and she also has an office, so congratulations on that. But just kind of like fill us in on what your services are, how people can contact you, and then we'll go to Tia.
Well, I'm still at sillertranslations.com, sillertranslations@gmail.com. Email is my preferred method of communication, just so I can keep track. And my always offer is going to be to start off with a consultation that will be about $30 for a full in-depth look at your situation and what your questions are, and then we can decide from there if you'd like to retain for other services, and we'll include those consultations in your retainer.
Okay, great. So Siller Translations .com. Mhm.
And my email is sillertranslations@gmail.com.
Okay. All right. And Tia?
My website is currently under. I've been a little bit busy, and so you can currently find me on Facebook business, and I have a small business page. And if you just use the @ Tia Consulting MX, you'll find me there, or just put in Tia Consulting Residency. My name and picture should come up. And I prefer the same email, tiaconsultingmx@gmail.com. My name is Tia, so it just works out well with that. So it's just easy to remember. And right now, that's what I'm using. Mostly the Facebook page, because people can share the posts. I try to do stuff where if people are doing it on their own, which I used to encourage a lot in my posts. But that was before talking to the immigration agents one-on-one, and it's gotten pretty hectic. They don't want questions. They want you to use this new platform and to process it yourself. And so where I used to send people, if you have any questions, if you're not using a facilitator or a professional in your area, and I think that's the value that, I know we got off on the digital services earlier. I find more value in my day-to-day contact with people in my area. So I really do focus on my areas, and that's where I can, each office has its own nuances. And so if you're working with somebody in those offices, you're more likely to be going through a program that's going to be successful.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, and that's why I was like, is it just for where you are? Is it everywhere? Because everywhere, people will be coming in from different places, and depending on where they want to go. But it sounds like some of the services that are digital and online, as far as setting up appointments for RFC or things like that, it's okay.
Yeah.
It makes sense. And also
it's okay. Yeah.
Right. And also the importance of it, understanding the importance of that. I think, like I said, there was kind of that rush of information, and then it feels like it's kind of fizzled. Same as last year when suddenly it's like, oh, you can't be here for more than the days on your whatever, because people are getting arrested. And I was like a rush of information and a lot of misinformation. And then suddenly, like, it just seems like, oh, well, what's happening? We're doing different things now. So I think it's just always kind of staying refreshed in people's minds that things are changing. It is changing all the time in Mexico for different reasons, but trying to get as close, if not as accurate as possible, to the truth and the facts, so that, you're not making mistakes that are costly or frustrating or, get you booted out of the country. So I think this is very, very informative. Thank you so much, ladies.
Well, one of the benefits of working with Anna is that she is a translator. There's only one translator that's able to be used for immigration. So even though I'm 6 hours from her, I can use her for both of my states. And the turnaround time that her office has, and a lot of people don't realize how much translation, once you cross the border, things change. And so if you're doing family unity or something, her office has the ability to have a very quick turnaround. And so I have to oftentimes contact her office for stuff all the way out here on the coast. So that she really downplayed that part of it. But that's really key to us being able to do our job, is to have that type of service and have it done so quickly.
Yeah, I agree with that. I had to translate 2 documents as well, one of which I needed quickly because of my son's solo traveling, and they wanted me to have his birth certificate and his apostille translated from English to Spanish. And it cost me a lot, even more, because it was like I need it tomorrow morning. So just so people understand, like, for us coming from the US, I think, there are a lot of these like little things and that are big things. And for us, we're just like, okay, we have it, here it is. And even if the seal and all that other stuff, they need it in Spanish and it has to be certified. And yeah, initially, I think someone else I spoke to was going to take a few days. I was like, no, I need it because yeah, he's leaving. I didn't know I needed this. So, it's just good to know that that's there. I did want to just insert really quickly, like, again, in terms of certified translations, are you able to provide that service outside of Guadalajara as well, or no? Okay, but people that
in Jalisco is where I'm certified. Even at the federal level, I'm only allowed to work within the
your state.
Jalisco Federal Circuit Court.
Okay.
But like for example, in the case of Tia, that she's like in the littlest state, they do make an exception for the Jalisco, but something like San
Okay.
Miguel would be a completely different
state. But people.
But you and I have had some transactions, like when it comes to your lease or a
Right.
letter or something more informal, then that's all good.
Right.
But when it comes to legal translation, it's very specific as far as who can have the seal and what you're paying for, in defense of the translator, is all of the money that the translator has to spend to continue to keep the certification.
Right.
And-
I just wanted to clarify that because I know I needed it. And also
even getting the apostille must have been a pain in the butt, and that's something that we can't help with. Like, we can tell you how to do it, but you're the only one who's going to be able to get the apostille. So
exactly.
Starting from there is a very complicated process.
But you are able to help with, like, yes, she looked at my leases and she was able to translate them and tell me what I should look out for. So there's a lot of services that she's not talking about, but
not that I want to let this translation thing die. My background is in real estate and certain legal aspects. And so all of the clients that I consult in real estate, and I've done this since 2005, I've said, when you go in for certain transactions, it has to be handled. It has to be handled in Spanish by law here, by federal law. And I tell people, when I hook them up with a lawyer, I say, have every one of your documents translated to English. Right. And so people's services like Ana are not just for rental contracts and stuff like that. When we're signing things, as big as real estate contracts and even wills, I facilitate starting of wills, and that's very specific per each person. Mm-hmm. And they want to make sure their wills are transferable to Canada or the US. Mm-hmm. Someone like Anna's services, a lot of people don't think about that, but because I have a fiduciary responsibility to my clients, I want to make sure that any transaction they get into down here, that they have that in English so that they fully understand what they're signing. Right. And her services like that are invaluable. And I suggest that on any consult I do in regards to real estate or land use.
Absolutely.
Yeah, the onus is on you.
Right. I think that's very key. You're making a huge investment. Even with the lease, like, I had you check my leases for me. I just think it's important to understand them, even if there's nothing there that you need to be concerned about. If you aren't fluent in Spanish, you might as well pay that, like you said, whatever it is, because it's going to save you in the long run from a lot of headaches if it's not legit, or if there's something in there that you weren't aware of, because it is a little different. It's not the same as doing, business as however you did it in your home country. The understanding is also very different, I think, for the most part. There could be things in there that you're just not aware of. So, yeah, it's worth it.
Patience and flexibility and understanding is key.
Yes.
Like, that is the culture. We're not infrastructure minded, or things that should make a lot of sense. It's like, just learn to have a sense of humor about it and be grateful about other things.
Yeah, no, I say that often.
Because they'll drive you crazy,
Yeah, no, I say that often. I always tell people, just come open for the experience, because I think most of why people come here is it's positive, it's culturally, it's different. maybe things you're not used to, whatever the case might be. But at the end of the day, you know, I always say this, walk with grace and just be happy that we're, you know, more or less we're accepted and we can come and, you know, live in a new country, a new place, learn about a new culture, a new language, so much to see and enjoy in Mexico, not just the cost of living, but, you know, just everything, I think. So I always just say to people, try to do your due diligence and, you know, do your homework, you know, research what you're doing, where you're going, and get help where you need the help. Don't try to always do it yourself. I'm not trying to do all that. I'm like, call Anna, call someone, like let them look at it for me. Cause yeah, I don't want to have any headaches. I'm like, oh, I don't want to have any fights down here. Anyway, thank you so much, ladies. And thank to everyone.
Thanks for having me.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for having me.
Thanks for coming
Very
on. And
gracious.
thanks for suggesting it. And thanks for reaching out. You're like my third time guest on my show. I really appreciate you and all your knowledge and willingness to share with our audience. And if you haven't subscribed, I always forget to say this in the beginning, please subscribe. Please hit the like button. You know, please support what we do here. I love living in Mexico. Thank you, Mexico, for receiving me. I always say that. I live in San Miguel de Allende, which is in central Mexico, but I've been able to connect with beautiful people here that are always trying to help foreigners that are moving here and even local people that need help with certain things. And I think it just makes life a little bit smoother. And that's why we're here to share that information. And don't forget to reach out to both of these ladies if you need any assistance on the topics we spoke about. And I'll put all their information down in the description box. So SillerTranslations.com and Tia Consulting, right, at Gmail. And also
Actually, Tia Consulting MX at
MX.
gmail.com.
Okay.
Yep.
At gmail.com. And Tia Consulting what was it? Resident on Facebook?
So on Facebook, if you just put the @ Tia Consulting MX, my page will come up.
Perfect.
Yep.
On Facebook. Okay, so that will be in the description box. And you can find me at expatlifemexico.com for consultations on whether or not you're interested in moving to Central San Miguel de Allende in Mexico, because that's my focus, because that's where I live. We also offer people who want to do relocation tours through CasaELM.com. So all of these places, and my channel has a lot of information about, you know, just people who live here already and people like Anna and Tia who are willing to help you get here and get settled and just start enjoying the next chapter of living in Mexico. So thanks, ladies. Have a great evening. Thank you all for watching, and we'll speak soon. All right. Take care.
Thank you.
Gracias.
Bye.
Bye.
Adios. Buenas noches.
Right.